Hey everyone, welcome to AccioJob's course on Frontend. Today is the first video of your entire journey that you're going to watch along with AccioJob on merge stack development, right? So I hope you are very much excited to go through the entire journey along with AccioJob, along with us, right? In which we'll understand and learn how an exact merge stack web development can be understood, and we could build very efficient, highly scalable websites using the same, right? So let's start with what are the things that you should know before you start or watch this first video, or before you enter into the journey of web development, right? So see guys, with AccioJob, the good thing is that we don't expect you to know the simplest of questions, such as what is front end. Okay, so a simple question like what is front end is also something that we'll be understanding. Actually, this is one of those things which we'll be discussing in this particular video. So my point here is just sit back and relax. Try to be very much excited. I hope you're very much excited about your journey that we are starting here. Now in today's video, we'll be starting from absolute scratch, as I told you right now. So you might be wondering, sir, what all things we'll know. Okay, so here is the thing. Okay, we'll be starting with what is front end. That is the absolute basics. We are not expecting you to know anything. Okay, let's start with the first thing. Now before we start, you might be wondering that, sir, what is front end? I think I know about it. Okay, and what is back end? I think I know about that too. Okay, well, it's great if you know that, but I would still suggest you not to skip this video, as we'd be getting our fundamentals clear. Ki what are the things that we'll be learning on, what are the things that we'll be working on, and what is the basics of development. So let's start with the first and the most basic questions, such as what is front end, sir? Like, we'll be starting with the front end, then we'll be moving to the back end. But what exactly is this topic? What exactly does this front end term means, right? So let's understand that. Okay, so the front end is also known as client side. It is also known as client side. What do I mean by that? So client side is the part of the web application that the user is going to interact with directly. Okay, so let's say you created a website, okay, and the user is now using it on their laptop, right? So that website that they visit or interact, the website that they visit or interact, is something that is built using front end. Okay, there are a few things that it encompasses, such as design, such as layout, and very importantly, functionality. These are the things that are delivered through front end. Okay, see, the design, that means how the website should look like, the layout, exactly similar to design only. Okay, and functionality, that the user is able to see and interact in their web browsers, right? So these are the three major functionalities that we deliver using front end. Okay, now the question is, sir, front end is okay, understood. Basically, it is something that the user is interacting with, something that we see on the screen as a customer, as a client, right? We are delivering design, layout, and functionality using this. But the question is, sir, how do we create front end? What are the tech that we'll be learning in front end? Okay, so before we understand what all things we'll be learning in front end, okay, just understand that front end has three core technologies. Front end has three core technologies. Okay, any guesses? You can pause the video and see it, or guess it, I mean. Yeah, so I hope you're correct. The front end encompasses of three major technologies. First being HTML, yes. Second being CSS, and the third one being JavaScript. The third one being JavaScript. Okay, so these are the three core technologies. I'm not saying these are all the technologies. We also have a lot of frameworks, a lot of CDNs, all that stuff, right? But when it comes to core technologies, when it comes to core tech, okay, then HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the three core technologies that you must know, okay. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the three core technologies. However, we don't usually build very scalable applications with it. Okay, as we go forward, we'll be learning the R of MERN, which is React.js, right? Just React.js, and that is a framework that is based on JavaScript. Okay, in further classes you will be understanding what is a framework, what is React.js, how is React.js better than JavaScript. But all that will be coming up, you know, once you get more comfortable into the course, into the entire world or entire realm of web development, right? So let's first understand a very basic of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, let's see how we can understand or where we can position it across the web development front end. So here is HTML that I'm writing, okay, and here I'm writing CSS, and here I'm writing JavaScript. Okay, so these are the three major core technologies that I told you about, right? Let's try to understand it with an analogy with a human body, right? So human body, just like web browser, a human body is also comprised of few things, right? So what are the main things of a human body? The first is the bones, or I would rather say the skeleton, right? That is the first thing, right? Makes sense. Okay, what is the next thing? The next thing is the skin, right? So basically skin helps us look good, right? Imagine a human without skin. I mean, not a very good picture, but yeah, it's ugly, right? So skin is used to beautify us. The muscles is the third thing, right? What does muscle do? So using muscles, I'm able to communicate with you by controlling the muscles of my jaw, right? I'm able to make these hand movements and all, and I'm, able to talk. Everything is being controlled by muscle, basically leading us to an interactivity. What does muscles provide? Muscles are providing us interactivity. Skin is providing us good looks. Yes, good looks. Okay, and what does bones and skeleton do? Well, that is a pretty easy question to understand. Okay, obviously it provides us a layout to our body, right? So this bones that we have, okay, this is the HTML. Make it beautiful, that is the part of skin, and make it interactive, that is the part of muscle. Just like this, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript also works in a very similar way. Okay, so let's start with HTML. Okay, HTML stands for hypertext markup language. Okay, it stands for hypertext markup language. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it is used to structure the content of the web page. Okay, it defines the elements, their arrangement on the web page, such as headings, paragraphs, tables, forms, images, lists, all that stuff, right? So we can say that when it comes to creating a layout or adding the content, like the basic foundation of our page, okay, HTML is nothing but similar to the bone of a human body. So you can say that HTML is the bones or the skeleton of a web browser, right? Why? Because it is used to create layout. It is used to add the content of the web page and all the elements that an HTML page must consist of, right? So that is what is the deliverable of HTML. Okay. Now CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, so this is what we mean by CSS, cascading style sheets. Okay, just like skin helps us look good, the elements that we create, such as the buttons, the tables, the images, the text that we add, okay, all those things need a lot of improvement in terms of visual experience or visual appearance, right? So CSS, in simple terms, is responsible for styling the HTML page. I hope it's clear that it is trying to make the page that we made beautiful. Okay, so how will you answer that in an interview? The CSS is responsible for styling the HTML elements, and it defines the visual appearance of the web pages, including aspects like color, font, layout, and responsive design for different screen sizes. Okay, so thus we can conclude that CSS is nothing but the skin of our web page, thus making it look good. Okay. Now here comes the JavaScript, the strongest part of front end. JavaScript is what? Okay, JavaScript is a programming language. JavaScript is a programming language. So this programming language, just like muscles, adds interactivity and dynamic behavior to our web page. Ever wondered how we are able to log in to our AccioJob account or to our social media accounts? That is interactive features like form, validation, and handling user interactions. Okay, a lot of things such as dynamic content updates, creating dynamic websites, adding validation, adding animation, creating features, all that part is coming under the influence of JavaScript. Okay, so JavaScript is like the muscles of our website, okay, thus creating an interactive and dynamic behavior to our entire page. using JavaScript. Try to understand. We can create elements, we can modify elements, we can interact with elements, and we can understand the user triggers, such as, as the user clicks on it. Okay, so we can understand, okay, the user clicked on it, we need to perform some action. So a lot of things like that are part of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Okay, so I hope you understand the basic understanding of what all things are there in front end. Now, here's a very important line. Front-end developers focus on creating an intuitive and visually appealing user interface. Again, front-end developers focus on creating an intuitive and visually appealing user interface. This is delivered by utilizing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Thus, we as a front-end developer are going to ensure that whatever website we are creating is responsive, accessible, and optimized for various devices and various browsers. With that in mind, I hope you understand what is exactly front-end doing, what are the key parts of front-end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and what each of them has to deliver, thus creating a complete website. Now that we are clear with exactly what is backend and what is it that it is delivering in the website, right? Now it's time to understand what is backend. I told you that web browsers have two things, front end, backend, right? So front end we are understood. Okay, let's understand what is it that the backend will deliver. So I hope you remember I just told that front end is what? It is the client side. And from that, I hope you can guess that what is backend? It is the server side. Okay, it is the server side, something that a user does not interact with directly. Okay, it is something that is working behind the scenes. What is it? It is working behind the scenes. So backend, also known as the server side, is part of the web application that runs behind the scenes, and it handles various important tasks such as data processing. Okay, you will get to know what do I mean by this data processing thing. Okay, we'll discuss an example and you will get it. Another important thing is storage, of course. Okay, and another important thing is communication. Okay, so these are the basic things that backend delivers as an entity. Okay, now again, backend, also known as server-side language, is the part of the application that runs behind the scenes and handles tasks related to data processing, storage, and communication. Okay, this is the complete super perfect line that you can answer in an interview, okay, to impress the interviewer. Now, of course, just like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the three components or the three core technologies in front end, backend also has a few things. Well, understand that for backend, the technologies that we are using can vary. Okay, such as for creating backend, some people prefer to use Node plus Express plus MongoDB, right? Whereas at the same time, some other developers would prefer to use Python plus Django. And at the same time, we also have another set of developers that will be using Spring Boot. Spring Boot is famously known to create good high level microservices. Spring Boot is obviously with Java, that goes without saying. Okay, so I want you to notice one important thing, that the technologies being used for backend can vary, such as someone might use Node.js plus Express.js plus Mongo, right? Whereas some developers might use Python plus Django, right? Whereas some developers might use Spring Boot plus Java, right? Well, my point here was to explain you that the core technologies on backend can vary. However, all the backend, whether it is written in Node, whether it is written in Spring Boot, whether it is written in Python, okay, they have the same three components. Okay, what are the three components that we are talking about? So the first component is called server. The second component is called application logic. Okay, this is the second component, application logic. And then we have the third component, which is database. Okay, so these are the three main components that we have under backend. This entire thing is referred to as backend. Okay, so let's understand what each of these component delivers, right? So I told you that these are the three main components that will remain constant in any of the tech stack that you're using: server, application logic, and database. Okay, so first thing is server. Server is a computer. Okay, try to understand. Server is a computer or some system that is hosting the web application. Okay, Now, what is the use case or what is the function of a server? Okay, the function of a server is to respond to requests from the client. What does it do? It responds to the requests. It responds to the requests from the client. What is the client? Everyone focus. What is the client? The client is front end. Okay, so we do have a front end. Let's say we have a front end here. There's a laptop that the user is using. Okay, he or she may clicked on a login button, let's say. So that login button will send a request, and that request will be received by the server, and server is the one that will be responding to the request of this client. Okay, it processes the incoming request, runs the necessary code, and then brings back the appropriate response, and then sends it back using the same handle. Again, it processes incoming request, then it executes the necessary code, and then it sends back the appropriate response. This is what a server does. Basically, it's like some kind of a gate that you can understand that takes a request, sends it to the application logic, gets the necessary response or the appropriate response, and sends it back. Okay, that is all that a server does. Okay, it is a computer or system that hosts this entire web application on front end. Okay, this is the very basic of what a server does. The important or the most important part of a backend is application logic. The most important part is application logic. What does it do? Application logic refers to the code or the algorithm, refers to the code or the algorithm that is supposed to deliver or create a response. Okay, what is this code consisting of? Business logic. Business logic. What do I mean by business logic? Such as, imagine a user is trying to log in, right? So in order to log in, there must be some lines of code that we have to run to check if the user has entered the correct credentials or not. So that business logic is written here. Okay, let's say on the client side, the user wants some data such as account statement. Okay, so account statement, getting the account statement is basically operations. So all the operational task is somewhat done here, right? So such things such as handling the business rules, business logic, and operations on the web application. Okay, all these things are done or written using a long code in application logic. What kind of tasks can it perform? It can perform tasks such as user authentication, right? It can perform user authentication. What else? It can perform data processing. What else? It can perform handling request. It can perform handling request, and it can also interact with database. Okay, this is a plus sign with database. Okay, so these are all the cool things the application logic could do, right? So application logic is a very powerful part or the heart of backend. Okay, so it basically has everything that the backend could do. Okay, so data processing, handling requests from the front end, user authentication, interacting with the databases, interacting with some external services maybe. Okay, all that stuff is done using application logic. Next comes database. Now I don't think so you need much explanation on what is database, right? Basically somewhere where the data is stored, right? So this is the main deliverable of database is where the data is stored. Okay, and this data is used by the application logic. Okay, and of course this goes without saying that this database that we are talking about, could be a relational database or a NoSQL database. Okay, so there are two types of databases: relational or NoSQL. Okay, more about these two terms will be discussed later on. Also, what are some features of database? So I'll just write it here. So database provides you the CRUD application. What do I mean by CRUD? Okay, so basically you can create data here, create/store data. Okay, you can receive data, receive/retrieve data. You can update the data, update the data, and of course you can delete the data. Okay, if you check CRUD, these are called CRUD applications. Okay, so this CRUD thing can be done on the database. Okay, done by whom? Application logic. Okay, so I hope that is clear. Let's once again go through, the entire thing. Server receives the request and responds appropriately. It also calls the application logic whenever it is necessary. So basically, server is just a computer or system that hosts the web application and responds to the request from the client, right? Then comes application logic. It has the code or the algorithm that can perform various business logic and operational tasks. Apart from that, the key features are user authentication, data processing, handling requests from front end, and interacting with the database. This is what the application logic will do. Then comes the database. The database is something that is storing the data. It can be relational or SQL. Also, it can help us perform CRUD application or CRUD operations on our data. Okay, so that is what database does. Okay, this is everything about backend. Many people, just thinking backend is something where some logic is written, that is all. Okay, no, it's much more than that. And I hope you know the basics of backend now. Let's take a very simple example of understanding how the front end and the back end will work together. So in order to do that, let's create the same thing again. Let's create this is our front end. Okay, and here let's assume the user is trying to log in. User trying to log in. User is trying to log in. Okay, so the user entered the email ID and the password here. Okay, and then it sends the data to the backend. Okay, and here is our backend. So backend has three things again. So the first is server, then comes application logic, and then comes database. So these are the three things. Okay, let's understand the entire flow. So what happened is the user opened course.acciojob.com, let's say. Okay, and the user is trying to log in now. Okay, so once the user has trying to log in here, the user enters the email, enters the password, and then clicks on login. Okay, the data is then stored here and sent as a request. So the request is being sent from the client to the server side, which is our backend. This request is received by the server. The server now receives the request and calls the necessary application logic. Application logic is where the code is written that checks. First of all, it checks that is it a valid email? Is it a valid password? Basically the data validation, right? And once that data validation is done, then this application logic will check the database to retrieve the information. Okay, one of the CRUD operations was to retrieve the information, right? So it will try to check, basically it will check if there is a key value pair, basically the email and password value pair. Okay, so this kind of a pair that exists in our database. If it exists, then it will get the data here that okay, yes, we do have a email comma password pair, exactly what the user has shared. Okay, then the application logic will return the necessary token or the response key boss, it's all good, it's correct, right? And that response, once received by the server, will then be sent to the front end, will then be sent to the front end, and the user will be able to log in. Okay, the user then will be logged in. Okay, so this is what happens. This is the entire journey of how this front end interacts with the backend. Okay, so I hope you got the basic thing. Front end and backend work together to create a complete web application. The front end communicates with the backend to request the data, to process user inputs, to display the result to the user, and the backend in turn will just handle these requests, performing the necessary operations using the application logic and retrieve data from the database. Then the backend sends a response to the front end. This collaboration between front end and back end helps us enables us to create seamless, scalable, comfortable functioning of the web application, thus delivering a very nice websites and very good cohesive user experience. So I hope this entire discussion on what is front end, what is back end, and how they work together along with an example is clear to you. So in the next video, we'll try to understand how we can start working on the front end. We'll be starting with the first thing, and the first thing is front end. And when it comes to front end, we follow a roadmap, such as from front end, we'll start with HTML, then we'll go to CSS, then we'll go to responsive web design, Followed by this responsive web design, we'll be learning a better way to write CSS or a faster way to write CSS, which is Bootstrap. And then we'll be moving ahead to the JavaScript part. Okay, so this is the entire track that we'll be starting with. Okay, so the next video we'll be trying to understand how to set up an IDE. What is an IDE? I don't know. Let's figure out in the next video. Okay, so IDE is Visual Studio Code. So we'll be using Visual Studio Code as an IDE, and we'll be understanding what is this and how to use it. So I hope you understood or enjoyed this first video. Let's move on to the next video to understand what better things do we have. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.